The Labour Party has always leaned pro-Israel, whether the party was in power or not. That was until September 2015.
Jeremy Corbyn, 251,000.
When Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the party by a landslide.
A better Britain, a more equal Britain, a more decent Britain.
He ran on a socialist platform that got 200,000 people to join the party just to support him.
Yes, we did! Yes, we did!
He also happened to be a lifelong campaigner for Palestinian rights.
And we will not allow our governments to go on with this cosy, law-breaking relationship with this rogue state that is destroying the lives of so many people.
The same rogue state would also destroy his leadership.
Enough is enough!
Corbyn would eventually be brought down by a false anti-Semitism crisis in the party, which was manufactured by three groups: the establishment media, the right-wing faction of his own party, and the Israel lobby in the UK.
Jeremy Corbyn's under fire again for his handling of an anti-Semitism row.
The words anti-Semitism.
I'm sorry, you're putting an awful lot of words into my mouth.
Huge row over anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism is simply, totally wrong.
Once at the head of Labour, now he's being suspended from the party altogether.
There's a lot to this story, so let's start at the beginning. At the Oxford University Labour Club, just 5 months after Corbyn had been voted leader of the party. The club had just voted on whether to participate in Israeli Apartheid Week, which is an international event with the goal of raising awareness about Israel's ongoing settler colonial project. They voted to support it. After the vote, the Labour Club's co-chair, a student by the name of Alex Chalmers, posted on Facebook that he was resigning. He said that a large proportion of the club had, quote, some kind of a problem with Jews, and that certain members' attitudes were becoming poisonous. This made the news.
I mean, if that's happening, at Oxford University Labour Club, then you'd suggest that there's a wider problem. So,
the chair of a national group called Labour Students, a man named Michael Rubin, took it upon himself to investigate more claims of anti-Semitism on campus. He put his findings in a secret report that we later got access to. Here are some examples of supposed anti-Semitism that he reported. Somebody rolled their eyes at me as I spoke. Or one student sent me a message that was aggressive and delegitimised the feeling I had. In a word, there was no evidence to substantiate his claims. These claims and others just like them were deemed sufficient evidence to put names forward. All the students accused were either Palestine solidarity activists, on the left, or both. Soon after smearing the Labour Party, Rubin got a job working for the Israel lobby, but we'll get to that later. The report wasn't publicly released. Instead, its fabricated and exaggerated claims made their way into different media outlets, amplifying Alex Chalmers' accusations and bringing everything to a boil. Let's pause for a second, because what happened here is at the heart of this whole story. Alex Chalmers accused the club of anti-Semitism, following a vote that condemned Israel and supported Palestinian rights. It had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Let's be clear, condemning Israel and opposing Israel's official ideology Zionism is not anti-Semitism, it's anti-racism.
The real fascists are you!
Conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism has become a standard tactic used to silence Palestine solidarity activists, and it would bring down many more members of the party critical of Israel.
I wholeheartedly apologise.
The MP Naz Shah was suspended by Labour and apologised to MPs for suggesting on social media 2 years ago that Israel should be moved en bloc from the Middle East to the US.
And the following month, she shared an image of Martin Luther King with the words, "Never forget that everything Hitler did in Germany was legal," and the hashtag apartheid Israel.
I mean, what's going through?
I mean, some of the things that you see on social media.
That's like something from the Ku Klux Klan.
Jeremy Corbyn's close friend Ken Livingstone made Labour's crisis far worse when he tried to defend Shah on the radio.
Let's remember, when Hitler won his election in 1932, his policy then was that Jews should be moved to Israel. He was supporting Zionism.
Nazi apologists, you Nazi apologists, rewriting history.
Ken Livingstone's comments may have sounded controversial, but he was right. Before the Holocaust, Hitler's regime had a policy of helping the German Zionist movement in their programme of moving German Jews to Palestine in order to become settlers. The Nazi government aided the Zionist Federation in this effort through a pact called the Transfer Agreement, or Ha'avara. But these facts were ignored. Jeremy Corbyn faced immense pressure to condemn Livingstone and to throw him out of the party.
There were concerns about the language used by Ken Livingstone, as there were of one or two other people, and so a number of people, a very small number of people I have to say, in the entire party membership have been suspended pending investigation.
With more and more such accusations making the news, and with a coup against his own leadership brewing, Corbyn assigned human rights lawyer Shami Chakrabarti to investigate anti-Semitism claims in the party. Her inquiry found that despite an occasionally toxic atmosphere, the party wasn't overrun by anti-Semitism. But despite that, the crisis continued for years.
Mr. Corbyn, what are you going to do about the perceived anti-Semitism in your party?
Despite flimsy allegations and members still being suspended
for dismissing claims of anti-Semitism.
Tonight, expelling one lifelong Labour activist.
Son of a rabbi expelled for anti-Semitism.
Establishment media continued to push the narrative that Labour under Corbyn was institutionally anti-Semitic and unsafe for Jews.
Does Labour have a problem with anti-Semitism?
Yes. There's a culture that's been fostered by the leader which tolerates anti-Semitism.
We don't know what a Corbyn government means for the British Jewish community.
Jeremy Corbyn has shown, quote, a lack of consistent leadership.
He does not have the leadership skills to pull together this party.
He never called us his friends, so he has got a problem with Jews.
And Corbyn began to buckle and apologise, even when he'd done nothing wrong.
We stand absolutely against anti-Semitism.
We will not tolerate anti-Semitism in any form.
Anti-Semitism was unacceptable in any form in our party or our society.
So who was behind this narrative, and what did they have to gain? To understand that, let's take a closer look at how the Labour Party is structured. The Labour Party is considered centre-left, but many of its policies in recent decades have been indistinguishable from the right-wing Conservatives, currently the party of government. Since Neil Kinnock took over the party in 1983, the Labour leadership has been overwhelmingly dominated by its right-wing faction. The apex of this was Tony Blair, who dragged his party and country into the invasion of Iraq in 2003, alongside George W. Bush. All that changed in 2015 with Jeremy Corbyn.
There is actually a popular uprising in favour of decency and humanity in our society.
He ran on a leftist platform that attracted hundreds of thousands of new members to Labour, almost 600,000 at its peak. But the party's right wing was not happy. Tony Blair warned against the Labour Party headed by Corbyn even before he'd won the leadership. Blair even said he'd prefer Labour to lose an election than win with Corbyn as leader and as Prime Minister. So it's no surprise that the right wing of the party egged on the Labour anti-Semitism crisis.
What this is all about is actually the struggle of the embittered old Blair MPs to try and get rid of Jeremy Corbyn.
Within the Labour Party, anti-Semitism is now more commonplace.
If that had happened under Tony Blair would have acted.
7 Labour MPs walked out of the party they once loved.
9 MPs resigned from the Labour Party.
Its leadership is incapable of dealing with issues of anti-Semitism and has no intention of doing so.
But crucially, it wasn't just the media and the party's right wing pushing the anti-Semitism narrative. It was Israel and its lobby too. They were horrified by the idea of Jeremy Corbyn, a vocal supporter of Palestinian rights and a critic of Israel's crimes, becoming the British Prime Minister.
We make demands of no arms supplies to Israel. We make demands for recognition of the rights of the Palestinian people.
Undermining and attacking anybody who supports the BDS, the boycott movement against in Israel. Because what they want to do is they want to ensure that the flow of money and arms to Israel continues unabated and at whatever cost. I will not be silenced in my opposition to the present regime to Israel.
That's Jackie Walker. She's a Jewish anti-Zionist and was a high-ranking figure in Momentum, the left-wing Labour activist group which was established to support Corbyn. In this clip, she's speaking after her suspension. It's another video that got her in trouble. In September 2016, a clip of her speaking in a training session on anti-Semitism was leaked to the press.
Seeking for information And I still haven't heard a definition of anti-Semitism that I can work with. How it was reported and how it was tweeted was I was basically saying, I can't find anywhere a definition of anti-Semitism to work with.
The incident caused uproar in the British media. The Board of Deputies of British Jews called Walker an unapologetic Jew-baiter. Walker was suspended from the Labour Party pending an investigation.
Here's the important part of that conversation that was conveniently left out.
And what you might say to actually delegitimise that right of Israel, that basic right of Israel as a country to exist. That is not appropriate. Zionism, Zion, not a term of use. And it's in any Labour Party not appropriate.
You are saying effectively that Zionism, is not open to debate as a concept, then that is really worrying.
This footage was captured by an Al Jazeera documentary called The Lobby, which came out in 2017, only a few months after Walker was suspended. In the series, an undercover reporter embedded himself in the UK's Israel lobby, posing as a pro-Israel activist within the Labour Party. He secretly recorded the activities of several pro-Israel Labour groups working to silence Palestine solidarity activists. One of those groups was the Jewish Labour Movement. They're the ones that leaked this video. Mike Katz, the trainer at that seminar, is one of the organisation's leaders. The JLM claims to have been around for a century, but according to a transcript of unused footage from the documentary, the group was actually reformed in September 2015, the same month Corbyn was elected party leader. The JLM's then director, Ella Rose, was featured in the documentary. Here she is talking about me.
Asa Winstanley! He was the one that wrote the douchey things about me.
The douchey things that I wrote about her were that she used to work at the Israeli embassy. A fact she hadn't disclosed publicly.
Before that was at the embassy working with Shai.
Shai is Shai Massot. He's the Israeli embassy official at the centre of the Al Jazeera documentary. He was revealed to be working closely with not just the Jewish Labour movement, but with groups like Labour Friends of Israel, or LFI. LFI is made up of members of parliament who support Israel. It's supposedly independent.
The embassy helps us quite a lot.
He's talking about the Israeli embassy. Remember him? That's Michael Rubin, who wrote this secret Labour students report into alleged anti-Semitism at Oxford University. Here he is a few months after writing that report as a parliamentary officer for Labour Friends of Israel.
We work pretty closely together. But like, a lot of it's behind the scenes.
Today, Rubin is the director of Labour Friends of Israel. There's one more person from LFI we need to talk about, and that's Joan Ryan. She wasn't just the group's chair, she was also a member of parliament. She's close with Shai too.
What happened with the names that we put into the embassy, Shai?
In the documentary, she's caught fabricating an instance of anti-Semitism against a fellow Labour Party member.
You've got a lot of money, you've got a lot of prestige in the world. I don't know why you get that. Sorry?
Labour Friends of Israel got a lot of money.
Well, I think so. I hear that it's a stepping stone to good jobs. A friend of mine's son's got a really good job at Oxford University on the basis of having worked for Labour Friends of Israel.
I'm ending the conversation because I am not really wishing to engage in a conversation that talks about get involved with this and then you get a good job in Oxford or the city or that is anti-Semitic. Sorry.
But do you think that...
Joan Ryan falsely claimed that Jean referred to jobs in the city, London's financial centre.
At no point did I ever say that Labour Friends of Israel will get people jobs in banking in the city.
That evening, at a rally to combat anti-Semitism organised by the Jewish Labour Movement, Joan Ryan described her day at the stall.
But we have also had 3 incidents of anti-Semitic harassment on our stand to the people who are staffing.
But Shai's most telling relationship with the LFI was with Al Jazeera's undercover reporter, Robin. Shai suggests Robin should set up a young LFI group. He offers him support, connections and funding. Why? because the younger Labour generation support for Israel has been dwindling, to say the least.
Not a lot of young people want to be affiliated. Obviously, when they will become MPs, they won't be affiliated, and then that's it. Chain is done. Because for years, every MP that joined the parliament, the first thing that he used to do is going to join LFI. He's not doing it anymore in the Labour Party.
Shai's even caught discussing taking down MPs and ministers with tough views on Israel.
No, she knows which MP question.
That is good to remind me.
The Deputy Foreign Minister.
When the Al Jazeera Undercover series was broadcast in January 2017, it made headlines, but the story died down a few days later. Massot was thrown under the bus by Israeli ambassador Mark Regev and sent back to Tel Aviv. The Israeli ambassador apologised to the UK's foreign minister, and that was basically it.
Whatever he may exactly have been doing here, his cover can be said to have been well and truly blown, and I think we should consider the matter closed.
Jeremy Corbyn did briefly call for an investigation into the Israel lobby's activities in the UK, but it went nowhere. Official Israeli documents later obtained by the Electronic Intifada suggest that Massot was no ordinary embassy employee. Rather, it appears he belonged to Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs, a semi-covert agency staffed by former intelligence officers, which is charged with leading Israel's global war against the Palestine Solidarity Movement. Imagine if this was a Russian government operative working closely with members of parliament. As for the organisation Shai worked with, you'd think their credibility would have been shot, but they all remain active.
I want the Jewish Labour movement to be absolutely part of and involved with the party at all levels.
Literally can't think of a single more important time for Labour Friends of Israel to be active.
And they remained at the front line of the anti-Semitism crisis. Remember these two?
I wouldn't say to a friend, go to a Labour Party meeting if you're Jewish. I couldn't do that to someone I cared about.
Yeah, it's been a really nasty experience as a Jew in the Labour Party.
Despite unprecedented efforts to oust him, Corbyn did far better in 2017's general election than anybody expected.
Jeremy Corbyn had defied the pollsters, the pundits and most of his MPs.
He came within a few thousand votes of winning and becoming Prime Minister.
I will resign as leader of...
Prime Minister Theresa May's Conservative Party lost their majority and she was soon replaced.
Corbyn isn't in government, but he's knocking at the gate.
The response from the Israel lobby was absolute fury. So 2018 saw the largest wave of the crisis to date. It resulted in the bogus IHRA definition of anti-Semitism being effectively forced on the party. This definition, promoted by Israel lobby groups, claims that calling Israel a racist endeavour is an example of anti-Semitism.
Free speech in the Labour Party. Israel is a racist state.
Labour's adoption of this definition legitimised the false claim that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That endangered freedom of speech for supporters of Palestinian rights.
It's already being sort of applied and interpreted in a manner to say you can't say the state of Israel is racist, you can't call it apartheid, you can't advocate for the Palestinian right of return because that will challenge Israel's so-called Jewish nature and therefore be a form of anti-Semitism.
Things only went downhill from there.
Are you going to resign, Mr. Corbyn?
After years of smears against Corbyn and waning confidence in the party, Labour lost the 2019 general election and Corbyn announced he would step down as party leader. But that's not the end of his story, because earlier that year, two Israel lobby groups had asked the UK's official racism watchdog, a body called the EHRC, to investigate the Labour Party for institutional anti-Semitism. It released its findings after Corbyn had resigned. The investigation didn't find the party guilty of institutional anti-Semitism, but it claimed to have found, quote, serious failings in leadership and an inadequate process for handling anti-Semitism complaints across the Labour Party. Corbyn disagreed.
The numbers have been exaggerated in my view.
But simply giving his reaction set off another storm.
In light of his comments made today and his failure to retract them subsequently, the Labour Party has suspended Jeremy Corbyn pending investigation.
The person who kicked him out was the man who had replaced him as party leader, Keir Starmer.
There are still those who think there's no problem with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, that it's all exaggerated or a factional attack. Then frankly, you are part of the problem too.
While he was running in the leadership election, he said, "I support Zionism without qualification." The Labour Party under Starmer looks very different to what it was just a few years ago. The party has shifted back to its status quo messaging on Israel. And left-wing voices critical of Israel continue to be purged.
She has paid the price.
They made such accusations against me.
It's an all-out onslaught by the Israeli government on the left globally.
In January, the party hired a former Israeli spy to work in Starmer's office. Asaf Kaplan used to work in Israel's Unit 8200. It's known for blackmailing and surveilling Palestinians. He's been hired as a social listening and organising manager. Social listening seems to be a sort of euphemism for surveillance.
Since he took over, does the Labour Party seem to you to be a very different sort of party now?
Well, it's changed for the better, for sure, in my view.
It's been a tough few years for leftists inside Britain's supposedly socialist party, but activists show little sign of giving up the fight. Despite the smears and purges, public support for the Palestinian cause remains strong, and the Labour Party grassroots, against all odds, is resisting the leadership's war against the membership. The tactic of using censorship to silence anti-Zionist voices, while a powerful weapon, is a sign of long-term weakness. Israel and its lobby know they can't win in open debate. Apartheid is a tough sell. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.